Okay, so today I'm doing another compatibility video, this time on thinkers and feelers in terms of MBTI personality type. That is a T type with an F type in a romantic relationship, and are they compatible? And guys, before I get into this, please remember that if you are looking for someone who is compatible with your personality to have a friendship or a romantic relationship, check out the TypeMatch app. We use personality type compatibility to match you with compatible matches, and it's available on iOS and Android, links below. So first of all, when talking about a T versus an F, it hurts me to even talk about it in terms of like letter dichotomies, because it is such an oversimplification of typology to talk in terms of like, well, thinkers are cold and feelers are soft, so they're natural enemies, they're not compatible. This is just like an oversimplification of both type and compatibility, and isn't exactly true. It doesn't matter so much if you're a T type or an F type. What matters is what cognitive functions you are operating with, and where those functions are in your stack as well as in your partner's stack, in terms of how compatible you will be and how able to understand each other, even though you have to bridge the gap between being a primary thinking type versus a primary feeling type. Now, please remember that thinkers and feelers both have a feeling function and a thinking function. Is just that their mind prioritizes one over the other, and so they play different roles in their mind, and it's a primary versus secondary orientation, but you can't have one without the other. So not all thinkers are made the same, and not all feelers are made the same. Up here I have, when we're talking about thinking and feeling, we're really talking about the judging axis of the cognitive type, which is either they are a TI and FE user, and I have those listed here by the types that are TI and FE, and are T dominant, and the TI FE users that are F dominant, and then or you have TE, extroverted thinking, and introverted feeling, FI. And I've listed those again right here by the T dominant ones and the F dominant ones. But even though these guys are both thinking types, these types have more in common than these types do, and these types have more in common than these feelers do. So like I said, you need both functions to work together, and one of them has to be an introverted function and the other has to be an extroverted function, because what we're doing with our cognitive functions is really balancing our perceptions and our judgments in terms of like internal and external experience, our internal judgment with the tribe's judgment, and it's a balancing act between the two. So you can't be a total introvert or a total extrovert. When you look at the cognitive functions, it just doesn't even exist. So now, like the video that I did on sensors versus intuitives and are they compatible, it works in a similar way with thinkers and feelers. It's easier for the thinkers and feelers who have these cognitive functions in the middle of their stack to bridge the gap between the two, because they're more balanced between their thinking and feeling functions, whereas these guys, I should use a different color, these, and these have a tougher time balancing those two aspects, because they are repressing the opposite function. It's their inferior function, which it can also be aspirational in its manifestation, but often it is repressed. So the TI users repressing their FE, the FE users repressing their TI. the TE users repressing their FI and the FI users repressing their TE. So it's harder for them, since they are repressing this function, to bridge that gap of understanding, because they're more off balance in terms of thinking and feeling than the other half of the types. So there's it's a harder time, but they can find great utility in talking to and being around people who have their repressed function higher in the stack, so that they can more easily learn to use it, emulate it, though it can't be pushed. So, like I talked about before, our cognitive functions are really the languages that our mind is speaking. And so communication flows much more easily between types that have the same cognitive functions. They're speaking the same language, whereas opposite functions, they're speaking in direct opposition to our chosen preferential way of viewing the world and making judgments based on those observations. So when somebody has the opposite cognitive functions, we're really looking at our shadow self. We're looking at our repressed self. And often what we don't like in another person is a representation of the things within ourselves that we have repressed and don't like about ourselves. So we're not going to look as generously on the viewpoint of a person who represents our shadow self. We're going to look at it through like this dark veil. And this breeds a lot of misunderstanding. Often people with totally opposite cognitive functions that work in opposition to each other will mock each other and just think that the other person is an idiot. So let's look at the 4 different relationship pairs that you can have in a thinker versus a feeler relationship. We have, first of all, a TI-FE user. Those are these up here, with an FE-TI user, these down here. So basically a TP type with an FJ type would be this first one. And this relationship, they do have the same cognitive functions. And what's beneficial about this relationship is that both the T types and the F types, they have TI. And TI, because it seeks to remove the individual and understand the object from an objective viewpoint, it's not at all personal to them, they are often able to arrive at the same conclusion. TI users, like even if they have different ways of primarily perceiving the world, like the NPs versus the SPs, for example, if they have TI, they can usually come to an agreement of seeing the world through the lens of logic. Now, they are speaking the same language of large logic and social harmony, so they can understand each other's perspective, but TPs and FJ types may clash on the prioritization of social feeling versus logical consistency. So the TP type will get annoyed that the FJ type is sacrificing logic for the sake of maybe other people feeling good about it and filling other people's needs. And, you know, it's kind of like, yeah, you're good, but you're not right. And the FJ will get annoyed with the TP for sacrificing others' feelings for the sake of logic. So you're right, but was it good? Sort of an argument between these two types. And this is more pronounced when, like I said, when they're more off balance. So like the EFJs with the ITP type. So it'll be more pronounced because they're repressing either that thinking or feeling function. And these differences tend to like dissipate more over the course of their lives. Then next one, the TI-FE user. So again, the TP type, but this time with a a primary FI user, the FP types. So these two have trouble in communication because the FP type speaks subjectively and they add themselves, they add their personal perspective, whereas the TP type seeks to remove themselves from the situation in order to be as objective as possible. So it's adding the personal versus removing the personal. And so these two can speak in direct opposition to each other and not understand like where the other person is coming from, like why what they're talking about even matters. And something I've noticed with this type of interaction is that when there's an argument, it tends that the FP type will add emotion to emotional context to things that the TP type says. And that makes the TP type angry because they don't feel understood. Like you're adding these emotions that aren't even present within me. Like I'm speaking without me. I'm speaking without my emotions being present so that I can be objective. And the FI type, because we're looking for our own functions in the other person. That's really what people are doing. And they tend to fish for it. They're like, well, it's not possible that you don't see this. You must be looking through the same type of lens that I'm looking through, but they're not. Their mind sees a completely different piece of the chessboard than you do. So they tend to add personal emotion to the TPs, to whatever they're saying, where it isn't actually present, making them feel misunderstood. And then it's the opposite here, where the FI user will state something that is important to them, and the TI user will question their reasoning. And that makes the FI user feel misunderstood in turn, because they are removing the emotion and looking for the logical underpinnings of why they value what they value. And it's not there. So they're both looking for input from each other that just isn't present. And this causes a lot of misunderstanding and arguments. The TEFI user and the FITE user. So that's the TJs and the FPs. So these guys, they're speaking from the same language of extroverted thinking and introverted feeling, but they can arrive at the same place if one, the FI or the TE is not being repressed too much in the interaction, and this is an important point, if they share similar FI values of what is valuable in this context, what's important in this situation, because FI is it's a subjective function. So FI users are not like TI users, and that they have a really hard time arriving at the same place because it's personal to them. So this is why two FI users of the same personality type can feel like they are completely opposite to each other because they have different values. They value different things, but it's the same underlying process for both of them. So you're really saying, oh, this is really the same person. They just think that they're so different and they hate each other, but it's all the same. Because what people tend to do is they're looking at the external manifestation of the function instead of the reasoning and the process by which they arrived there. Like I had a person in my comment section talking about like SI, and what if an SI user likes pineapple on their pizza because it's what they grew up with? Are they going to feel they're not going to feel understood by other FI users who don't like pineapple on their pizza? And I'm like, no, it's not about the pineapple on the pizza. It's not the external manifestation of the thing. It's about like, look at the reasoning. It's what I grew up with. That is an SI reason that will resonate with and be understood by other SI users, even if it's not what they grew up with, if it's not what they like, you know, and what makes them feel comfortable, what they want to maintain. So it's a different external manifestation of the same underlying process. Whereas an SE user is going to say, I don't care what kind of pizza I grew up with. That pizza over there tastes good. I like, maybe they like the pineapple on the pizza, they would say, because I like the salty with the sweet. So it's more like dealing with the SE external sensory experience versus the SI past impression of what I grew up with. And that's what I'm talking about when I say that they will understand each other. So is that they understand the processing behind the thing. It's, you know, when they have opposite processing, they're just going to be like, I don't even understand why you're bringing this up. I don't even understand, like, where does this come from in your brain? Like, why are you even talking about this? I don't understand how you got this input and you spit out that output. But if they have the same cognitive functions, they will resonate with the reasoning behind it. And won't disrespect each other in that way. So getting back to the TEFI users and FITE users, they can clash on the prioritization of regulating versus value. So TEFI, the TJ, will get annoyed that the FP sacrifices on planning and efficiency for the sake of what they feel is important at the moment. So like, you're good, but you're not right. And the FP will get annoyed that the TJ sacrifices what they feel is important in the moment for the sake of planning and efficiency. So you're right, but you're not good, kind of argument again. And then finally, TEFI and FETI. So the TJs and the FJs, these guys will clash a lot because they follow opposite processes and they don't understand each other's perspective or look at it favorably because they are so far repressing the functions that the other one has as their top two. It's like, your primary way of looking at the world is so deep in the shadows for me. I'm not going to understand it, or if I try to, I'm going to put a shadowy slant on it. And nobody feels understood when they're forced to translate their mind to the other person. So they may mock and misunderstand each other. To the FJ, the TJ can seem ruthless and impersonal, whereas the FJ can seem sort of like spineless or fake or lost to the TJ. Now, I'm not saying that any of these types are like that. I'm just saying this is like how they may appear to each other through their own shadowy perspectives. So ultimately, can T and F types get along? Yes, they can, but it's easier in instances like the ones that have the feeling and thinking functions in the middle of the stack and have the same functions in the middle of the stack to bridge that gap. So, for example, these and these and these and these. Now, they have other issues to be addressed, but as far as just breaking out the F and T portion of it, which is all I'm talking about here, this is how it works. So I would love to know what you guys think about being in an F versus T relationship or an F versus T household. Usually people have a lot of experiences with their family that they want to share, and instances where they didn't feel understood because the person had a different a way of viewing the world that they had, which is coming down to the cognitive functions. So again, please support this channel by liking and subscribing, and I'll see you next time.
Your personality is unique. It's hard to find someone that understands you. Try dating using personality type matching. Find out who you're compatible with using Myers Briggs and Big 5 personality scores. Download TypeMatch and start dating by personality type compatibility today. TypeMatch, available on App Store and Play Store.